Go Charizard! Go Scyther! Take this flamethrower! Scyther, use agility to avoid it! Yeah, men are all about cool Pokemon, huh? Sure are. When I grow up, I'll have tons of cool Pokemon and be a cool Pokemon master. Me too. Right, it's a promise, man to man. Yeah. However, I was a girl. How I Became a Pokemon Card is a 1999 manga series written by the legendary Pokemon TCG card illustrator Kagemaru Himeno. Even if you're not familiar with the name, I am absolutely sure you have seen a few of her cards before. Actually, I myself don't own a lot of cards, but after a look into the boosters I got this last month, I found 2 cards illustrated by her, with these really wonderful colors and deep contrasts, but arguably her work in the 90s is the most iconic and really easy to identify, depicting the Pokemon world in dreamy pastel watercolors which bleed into each other with small white specks of dust floating in the air to capture a surreal nostalgic aesthetic that is a staple of early Pokemon. I look less worried about brand compliance and willing to play with shapes and proportions to ooze with personality. It's like Sugimori with saturation turned up a notch. She started working as an illustrator for Ribbon Original in 1994 and said that her dream was to write manga for girls, but before she noticed, she was already fully taken over by a small gig that suddenly became a huge gig called Pokemon. Himeno has been working with Pokemon since 1997, one of the only few original TCG illustrators who are still active today. She has also illustrated for the main games and the infamous Korokoro magazine, blending Pokemon ecology with the real world in really interesting ways. She has also illustrated the children's book Pokémon Tales, as well as all 6 volumes of How I Became a Pokemon Card, the manga we will be talking about today. Published in Japan by Media Factory, which was the company producing Pokemon TCG material before the Pokemon Company was even established, the idea was to have a TCG-focused publication running in parallel to the main manga, mostly likely as a strategy to boost TCG sales. The whole pitch of the series is to tell small stories that are background to the scenes depicted in TCG art. For example, you see a card of a Sunkern running away from a Spearow. You might be wondering how I ended up in this situation. Himeno, who has originally illustrated the card, will now tell you how Sunkern ended up in the situation. Each of the 6 volumes features a promotional card related to one of the stories inside that edition. Slice of life stories set in the Pokemon world but centering around regular, ordinary people who don't necessarily want to be the very best but go through their lives with Pokemon by their side. The final chapter of How I Became a Pokemon Card tells the story behind the Japan exclusive card, Birthday Pikachu. I was just in Japan last week and I went through every manga shop in Tokyo trying to find the original manga to show you in this video, but just like everything Pokemon TCG touches, these are going for thousands of dollars and are super hard to find. This manga was never published outside of Japan or even got an official translation, and I would not be able to share this story today without the support of Milo's Cat on Tumblr alongside Horsey Pope and Salas. Thanks so much for preserving and making the scanlation available. The story continues with Akari's first day in middle school, protesting that now he is obliged to wear the girl's uniform and saying he has never worn a skirt before. I am Akari. Until today, the day of my middle school entrance ceremony, I held in my heart the dream of becoming a master of cool Pokemon, along with the belief that I was a boy. Akari is extremely embarrassed, and there's a lot of interesting Japanese language specificities going on here. According to the translator, in the Japanese version, Akari always uses the typically male pronoun ore, and his mother demands he uses the more neutral watashi instead. But masculinity is present in every aspect of his life, stated out loud from believing I was a boy to him saying, "For 13 years I've lived the life of a boy. How can I just change overnight?" Akari goes to school wearing a skirt and surprises even his closest friend, Akira. They made a promise between men that they would both become masters of cool Pokemon, and Akira reveals that he was given his first, a really cool Pokemon, Scyther. And that makes Akari super jealous. While his friend got a Pokemon as a middle school entrance gift, all he got was harassment and gender dysphoria. His mom says he is too young to have a Pokemon, but after begging, asking for it as a birthday gift, and even promising to act more girly, his mom finally gives in. All he asks for is a really cool Pokemon that can beat Scyther, and that's what he gets as a birthday present. His first Pokemon is, "Hey you, Pikachu." Mom, is it just me, or is Pikachu more of a cutesy type of Pokemon? Come on, Akari, it's perfect and super effective against Scyther, just take it. Akari's mom says, I'm giving you this Pikachu with the sincere hope that it will bring you the kind heart of a girl, which like, not very woke of her. The gender binary here is really interesting to me, honestly, because there is this extreme dichotomy between cute and cool. Cute is girl, cool is boy. Akari is extremely disappointed that Pikachu seems to fall more into the cute category, but honestly, I don't see it as girl-coded at all. Like, Chansey or Blossom, I get it, but like, Pikachu was chosen as Ash's partner in the anime instead of Clefairy, specifically for its gender neutrality. Well, the 90s, but back to it. Akari gets extremely frustrated with the gift and runs away into the woods, in what I would argue is the most obviously clear depiction of gender dysphoria throughout the entire Pokemon series. His dream was to be a cool Pokemon trainer like his cis friend, but his mom keeps on imposing femininity over him. Akira comes to try and talk to him, but Akari says he doesn't know how he feels. I mean, cis people trying to underplay dysphoria really do be the quintessential trans experience. But Akira is actually really sweet here. When he says you can't judge coolness by appearance, while this entire story equates coolness to masculinity, what he's actually saying is that being a boy isn't linked to what you look like. It's how you live, which is, low-key, a really nice message, mostly in media for kids. Then they find out that they have accidentally wandered into a forest and were surrounded by Scraw's Grand Festival VGC champion Ariados. Scyther's level is too low. Akira can't fight them. But, oh, hey you Pikachu! You can't judge coolness from appearance. You can't judge masculinity from appearance. Sorry, I just love Pikachu too much. Akari learns the most valuable lesson you can learn in trans media for kids. That gender isn't what you look like, it's what you feel inside. Mainly, when what you have inside is stabbed thunderbolt. Akari decides to apologize to his mom, who is kind of in the wrong here and should learn that you don't have to be a girl to have a kind heart, but we'll get to that in a second. But also apologize to Pikachu for dismissing him. After ruining the party, they throw another one just for Pikachu, and that's how he became a Pokemon card. So I think this is so interesting, right? For a lot of reasons, but my feelings are that while this is undeniably 100% a trend story, I can't help but shrug the feeling that it has some accidents going on here and there. I'm delving into speculation territory because there are absolutely no interviews anywhere about this manga, and when I did reach out to Sensei Himeno on Twitter, she, well, just replied to me with this emoji. I don't know what it means. Please help me. But it also shows how different the 90s were in relation to transgender story, for good and for bad, both in having less knowledge about what transness is, but also in being less taboo to talk about gender diverse kids. The biggest franchise in the world published a story about a 13-year-old Pokemon trainer out loud stating he lived the life of a boy. He believed he was a boy who was assigned female at birth, and textually deals with gender dysphoria, and nobody batted an eye. No boycotts, no discourse, the good old days when conservatives worried about Pokemon just meant satanic panic.
Every time that you see Mewtwo, he's in this pose. It means hail Satan. Jesse and James are an evil gang looking to steal rare Pokemon. They're also prone to cross-dressing.
If this was written today, well, I don't think this would ever get written today given how safe Pokemon likes to play around queer topics. In post-woke 2026, whenever you mention trans kid, people lose it. Just look at the very well-behaved Roman Empire profile people in the comment section below that I didn't manage to block yet. Even though from a company standpoint, Pokemon tends to be really progressive and outspoken about queer rights, from a storytelling perspective, they are notably avoidant when stating anything out loud. It is post-woke after all, and companies are scared. In 2025, a survey of corporate executives found that nearly 40% plan to reduce their engagement with Pride, with 65% fearing backlash. Pride Month for a lot of queer content creators is when we make most of the revenue that gets us through the year, and even though Pink Money has all the issues that it has, the lack of it also signifies a scary social shift. To know that a story from the 90s couldn't be told today is crazy. Just look at Disney directly interfering with their creative directors, forcing the hand so that Pixar would ciswash and hide away trans elements from their new series Win or Lose. According to one of the animators, in one episode, one character was originally written to be a trans kid, dealing with internal struggles and eventually coming out as herself. That story was edited out to just become a girl who really wants to play softball, and the fact that these stories cannot be told anymore like they were in, say, 2016, that is so harmful to kids who might be dealing with bullying or have difficulties with their identities. Growing up as a trans kid, I never really had access to stories like this to help me elaborate why I felt different, and honestly, I think that was directly responsible for me taking so long to come to terms with my identity. As a kid, I just remember thinking how wonderful it would have been to be born a girl, but, well, you get what you get, right? Better not tell anyone about this, otherwise I will be bullied forever. The first mention I've even heard of trans people existing was when I was 10, a transphobic joke in a stand-up comedy set that I didn't fully understand. But even though I didn't have access to trans media or even know that that was a possibility, that did not stop me from being completely obsessed with the Fairly Odd Parents episode, The Boy Who Would Be Queen. I must have been 7 or 8 when I first watched it, and seeing Timmy magically turn into a girl touched something deep inside of me. I probably watched this episode over 100 times. Not having access to proper trans media made me wish and daydream for magic instead, because as a kid, that was the only possibility I knew of. I grew up really obsessed with body swap stories because they were the only thing I could find that would scratch that itch I had deep down. I think the first time I saw a proper trans story in media was Nomi in the Wachowski Sense8 when I was already 18. If I had seen her as a teen, if I had read Akari's Pokémon story as a kid, or maybe a better version of it, that might have helped me realize my queerness much earlier. I find it difficult for a story like that to be published in that way today because of corporate fear and pushback, but also because it shows its age in some weird choices and pushes for gender conformism, mostly when we talk about Akari's mom. Akari, for starters, is a traditionally feminine name that you wouldn't really give when writing a trans boy. A story like this, from a progressive standpoint at least, would not have the mom trying to impose femininity into him as a love and caring take. And in my personal opinion, I think that even though Sensei Himeno absolutely wrote a trans story, she ended up picking up some narrative tropes from tomboy stories, mostly the ones from the 90s. These are definitely dated when looking back at today, considering they almost always convey that a girl presenting herself a little bit more masculine is just a phase, and that maturing is embracing a traditionally feminine role. I think maybe some lack of knowledge about transgender issues might have led Sensei Himeno to mix up those two ideas a little bit. Which reminds me a lot of how the character Anybody was portrayed in the original 1961 West Side Story. He was presented as a tomboy, but was definitely written with a lot of trans-masculine characteristics. So much so that in the 2021 remake, they rewrote him to become explicitly a trans man, while changing very little else from his character. I think it's important to understand that from the perspective of a writer such as Himeno, these stories can be very much inspired by people and actual kids that she knew while growing up in the 80s in Japan. A moment in time where gender roles were very strict, but overall, with the conversations we have had about gender in the last 30 years, just like Anybody's, I don't think this story would look like this today. A small tangent, but something I do need to mention. I love that this kind of confirms an argument I presented back in my Chikorita video. While of course, the final message of this story is that there is no such thing as a Pokemon for boys and Pokemon for girls, it gives us an interesting insight at how the creative team behind Pokemon inevitably places them in categories such as cool and cute. In practice, that means very little for each individual player, but from a marketing perspective, there is a demographic look when designing Pokemon, stating that cool Pokemon are trying to please younger boys, and cuter Pokemon are trying to catch the eyes of girls, as I argued was the case with Chikorita being the more feminine-coded starter in the first generation that had a girl as a playable character. Stories such as Akari's might sound small and unimportant, mostly when we remember we are talking about a character in a TCG manga from 25 years ago that never got published outside of Japan. And it's really sad that this was the case, because had Akari ever showed up in the Pokemon anime, for example, I'm sure little young me would have been obsessed with him. In a series as popular and widespread as Pokémon, it is important that everyone playing these games and watching this series are able to see their own stories there. Because in a world where more and more doors and opportunities are denied for trans people, and specifically trans kids, a reminder that they can too be a really cool Pokémon trainer is more important today than ever. I'm writing this section a few days after recording because real life things have happened, and since this is my first video for Pride Month, I think it's really important that I address them here. Because the world is sometimes ugly and cruel, and as much as I would like this to be a feel-good video about representation in media, I don't think I can talk about Pokemon and trans youth without talking about Juniper Blessing. She was transgender and 19 years of age. She had one of the most hauntingly beautiful voices I have ever heard. She loved Maractus, Ninetales, and Pachirisu. She named herself after Professor Juniper. She had her entire life ahead of her, had she not crossed paths with a transphobe who had his mind poisoned by the same discourse that villainizes, dehumanizes, and exerts the power of necropolitics into trans bodies. The discourse of Trump and J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk. That is the real result of villainizing trans people. It's never about bathrooms and sports, never. It's about not wanting to see us in any spaces, anywhere. That is why it's so important to tell and normalize little stories, like Akari's in a huge franchise like Pokémon. Not only to give kids a chance to give a name to the confusing feelings they might feel, but also to humanize our stories to people who might have never heard them. And I don't have an easy fix. I am honestly as powerless as Juniper was. But I have a small platform, and I can ask you to donate a Pokemon plush to a shelter near you in her name, as her friend suggested, or financially support transgender aid groups in your area. Remember Juniper and the trans youth all over the world who had their futures denied. What can we do collectively to make sure that they have an opportunity to live? For this Pride Month, dear stranger online, what I would really like to ask of you is to do exactly like Akari's Pikachu. Always step in to protect trans kids. This video is part of the Pokémon Pride fundraiser efforts. During the month of June, queer and allied content creators will be streaming, shiny hunting, and creating content in order to raise funds for queer youth in need. Every donation will be matched 1-to-1 up until $10,000 and will be directed to the Lambert House LGBTQ+ Youth Center in Seattle. You can donate using the QR code on the screen or clicking the link in the description, and I will be eternally thankful. There will be more LGBTQ-themed Pokemon videos and live streams on my channel and on Twitch throughout the entire month as part of this fundraising effort, so please subscribe for more content such as this. Hope to see you back on this channel soon.